You've seen the movies, marble temples, perfect white statues, wise philosophers in flowing robes. Now throw all of that out. The real ancient Greece was a place where they cleaned themselves by scraping the sweat and grime off their skin with a blade, and then bottled it up and sold it. Where the philosophers you admire had opinions about bathing that would horrify your dentist. Where the most famous warriors in history ate a soup so vile that their neighbors said it explained why they weren't afraid to die. Welcome to Greece. Well, the Greece that they don't show you. Welcome to the Greece they don't show you. Because the great thinkers of ancient Greece, the ones whose names you still learn in school, often went their whole lives barely washing. Some believed too much bathing made you soft, weak, even un-Greek, so they stayed dirty on purpose. And that was only the beginning. Let's start with how they got clean, because the Greeks were actually obsessed with the body. Athletic, oiled, sculpted. They just had a very different idea of hygiene than we do. There was no soap, not as we know it, so if you wanted to clean yourself, step one was to cover your entire body in olive oil. Then you let dust and sand stick to it. Then, and this is the clever part, you took a curved bronze tool called a sturgill, and you scraped that whole oily, dusty, sweaty paste right back off your skin. The stuff you scraped off had a name, gloios. A delightful sludge of oil, sweat, dead skin, and dirt. And here's the part that'll get you. From a famous athlete, that sludge was valuable. People bought it. They genuinely believed the gloios of a great Olympian carried his strength and could heal. So they rubbed it on their skin, their aches, and their injuries. You could quite literally buy a jar of a celebrity's scraped off body sweat, and people did. We even have the receipts. An inscription from a Greek gymnasium lists the scrapings as a source of income. The sweat was collected, sold, and the money went back into running the place. Their gym paid for itself in filth. Now you're clean. Time to answer nature's call. I hope you're not shy. There was no toilet paper in the Greek world. Instead, when you finished, you reached for a handful of small, smooth stones or broken shards of old pottery. These had a name, pessoi. You'd use the pottery to scrape yourself clean, which, if you're picturing the rough edge of a broken plate, yes, exactly that. Historians think it may have caused everything from irritation to hemorrhoids. But here's my favorite detail in this entire video. Sometimes the Greeks would take a shard of pottery, carefully scratch the name off someone they hated onto it, and then use that one to wipe. Think about that. The ultimate insult. You could quite literally drag your enemy's good name through the worst thing imaginable. 2,500 years before the internet, the Greeks invented the pettiest revenge in history. They were even proud of it. There's a Greek proverb meant to praise being thrifty that goes, 3 stones are enough to wipe. A whole culture with a saying about the correct number of rocks. All that excitement works up an appetite. Let's eat! And this is where we meet the Spartans. The most feared soldiers in the ancient world were famous for one dish above all, melazomos, black broth, a soup made of boiled pork, salt, vinegar, and blood. It was so notorious that a visitor from another city reportedly tried it, gagged, and said he finally understood why Spartans didn't fear death. After a lifetime of that for dinner, dying in battle probably felt like a relief. Then there's the wine. The Greeks loved it, but drinking it straight, undiluted, that was considered the mark of a barbarian. So they watered it down. Fair enough, except they didn't stop at water. They added seawater for a salty tang, pine resin, which made the wine taste like a tree, a drink you can still buy in Greece today called retsina. And sometimes to cut that sourness, they sweetened it with lead. Lead has a naturally sweet taste. It also slowly poisons you. So the fancier your wine, the more it may have been quietly killing you. Let's say all this is starting to make you feel unwell. Time to see a Greek doctor. And I want you to lower your expectations, then lower them again. Greek medicine ran on the idea of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Fall ill and a doctor decided your humors were out of balance. The fix? Rebalance them, usually by removing some. That meant bloodletting, deliberately draining a patient's blood. It meant deliberately making you vomit. And it meant a doctor becoming very, very familiar with everything your body produced. Because to diagnose you, a Greek physician would examine your fluids in detail. He'd smell them, he'd study their color, and some genuinely tasted them, checking whether your sweat or your earwax was sweet or sour or salty, because they believed the flavor revealed the disease. In fairness, some of it worked. The Greeks were the first to insist that disease had natural causes, not divine curses. They observed, they recorded, and they laid the real foundations of medicine. They just had to taste a lot of earwax to get there. Whew. All right, you survived the doctor. Now let's make you beautiful, because the Greeks cared enormously about beauty, which is exactly the problem. To achieve a pale, fashionable complexion, wealthy Greeks painted their faces with a white powder. That powder was made from lead, the same poison that was in their wine, now applied directly to their face every single day. Over time, it damaged the skin, which meant you needed even more powder to cover the damage. A beauty routine that created the exact problem it was hiding. And then there were the eyebrows. The Greeks' ideal leaned toward a single strong brow. The closer the two sides came to meeting in the middle, the more beautiful and intelligent you were considered. Women who weren't naturally blessed darkened the gap with dark pigment. And some, this is real, went further and glued on a small strip of goat hair with tree resin to bridge the two. So the peak of Greek fashion was lead white skin, reddened lead-tinted lips, and a unibrow that might be partly goat. Gorgeous. Very gorgeous. Here's the thing that actually stays with me about all of this. The same civilization, the oily, unwashed, sludge-selling, goat-browed, lead-drinking one, invented democracy, founded philosophy, built the Parthenon, laid the foundations of medicine, mathematics, and theater we still use today. We remember the marble and the ideas. We forgot the smell. And maybe that's the real lesson here. The people who built the foundations of our entire world weren't gods on pedestals. They were humans. Sweaty, itchy, gloriously gross human beings, figuring it all out as they went. Every civilization looks clean from a distance of 2,000 years. Get up close and they're all a little disgusting, just like us. If you'd survive a week in ancient Greece, which, be honest, you would not, hit subscribe. There's a lot more history down here they never taught you in school. And tell me in the comments which ancient civilization should we scrape into next.